Hey, Diana, did you know that you can improve your team's execution using one simple formula?
Mark, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, jurists and just curious, welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast. Here you'll learn about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. Hosted by Marc Whitehead, a seasoned lawyer who remembers when fax machines were cutting edge, and Diana Berry, attorney, COO, and the brains behind the scenes. Together, they are the legal world's most dynamic duo since statutes met regulations. So if you're looking to build a practice, not a prison, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful Barrister, where legal legends are made.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Successful Barrister Podcast, the podcast that talks about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. With me today is my incredibly intelligent co-host and COO of my law firm, Diana Berry. Notice that I got your name right today.
I appreciate that. I think that's 2 in a row.
2 in a row. This whole married name thing is killing me, but we will get there. So, Diana, what are we talking about today?
40X,
Okay.
the 4 Disciplines of Execution book.
All right, 4 disciplines of execution. So, and the key here is execution. And
Yeah.
God knows every time I see my attorneys, I want to execute one. But we will save that for another podcast
I
episode.
hope they don't listen to this.
Trust me, they're not listening to this podcast. No way in hell. But just in case, I was just kidding. All right, execution. So let's talk a little bit about execution. I know that's been in the news a little bit lately. You know, what's been going on with that?
Well, I think that any leadership management, you can't pick up anything without talking about execution. And so I think the thing we were talking about leading up to the preparation of this was, I think the military corps, Marine Corps maybe, had even...
I think it was the Naval Medical Center. There was a press release and an article about how basically the Navy was getting into 4DX, 4 disciplines of execution, which is weird because you would think the military would have already gotten the execution part down.
They'd be precise.
Even the military that has hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition and is looking for a new system. So if it's good enough for them, maybe it's good enough for us.
Yep, and the authors in the book, I think, was it Marriott? They lead with a chain where the manager that implemented, it was Marriott that implemented 40X. So you'd think that a big public company that's been around a while would have all the systems, processes, procedures down. And they saw huge returns in their scorecard by implementing 40X.
So the bigger issue here with execution, we've all made grand plans in our life, hopefully anyway, at this stage in our life. We've made plans. You follow the procedures that they teach you in Atticus or at PILMA or any of these things. You set your 5-year vision, you set your 3-year plan, then you break it down to your 1-year goals and then your 90-day goals. The problem, everybody's great at planning. Most people do a very poor job of executing the plans that they create.
Why do you think that is?
People have day jobs.
Exactly.
You know, what is defined in the 4DX book, the author defines it as the whirlwind. We all have our daily whirlwind, things that we have to do. So, for me, I come in the morning, I have meetings with people, meetings with clients. I have to meet with my bookkeeper. I have to meet occasionally with my accountant. We have all sorts of vendors that we have to meet with. I'm constantly in meetings with people. And it leaves no time, this whirlwind that I'm stuck in, and I'm sure you're the same. I've seen your calendar. Your calendar is more insane than mine is. You're constantly stuck in the daily grind, the daily whirlwind. And what it does, it prevents you from using that quality think time to actually execute on the strategic projects that can actually move our firm forward.
Yeah, so I think, for most of our listeners that are still in that practitioner mode, what I would call production time, right? The drafting of the brief, responding to opposing counsel, or reviewing a file, that quality, like you said, think time, the time to really kind of create the argument. and then just move things forward, like you said. Like, that's their day job. And then all in between then, we ask our attorneys to do the whirlwind things, right? Manage a team, deal with, oh, my car wouldn't start, so now I can't come in, and can you reschedule these onboarding calls, and all the other things that they have to do, the EOS stuff we ask them to do, and the leadership.
And it's particularly tough if you're a litigator.
Exactly.
If you're more of a transactional attorney, I think you have a little bit better control and the ability to block your time and to do your time blocking. But when you're a litigator, you have opposing forces out there that are trying to mess with you. You have your opposing counsel, you have the court and the court schedule, and the court's going to do what they want to do. You have your client you're having to deal with as well. And in theory, you and your client should be on the same page and moving in the same direction. But I don't know how many times you have to rein in the client who's going rogue on you.
Yeah,
Kind of reminds me of the Donald Trump trial that just happened. Can you imagine the attorney who represented Donald Trump? And he's probably spent all of his time.
He had a whirlwind.
That was a whirlwind. God help him.
So you were a PI attorney before this became your focus, and you used to talk about was it the trial calendar or just being on hold? And so it just, I think what the authors say is that and I'm quoting now, the whirlwind robs you of the focus required to move your team forward. And so that's really the distraction. You and I talk often about, well, what's the real harm? Well, it's a distraction, Mark, right? So that's what the whirlwind is. It's a distraction for your ability to push the bigger projects forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I go back to there's a thing called the Eisenhower Matrix. And this actually I was first introduced to the concept of the Eisenhower Matrix through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was a Covey book. So the 4 Disciplines of Execution is actually written by, I think the original Covey was Franklin Covey, which actually was 2 authors. It was Franklin and Covey. The original Covey has passed on, but his son, Sean Covey, now runs the company. So the 4 Disciplines of Execution is actually a follow-up book, as you will, within the family of the original book, which I think I read for the first time 30 years ago, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But the Eisenhower Matrix basically splits your time into 4 quadrants. There's the important and urgent, and there's the important but not urgent. That's above the line on the matrix, and that's where you're supposed to live. You're supposed to live in the important 2 quadrants of the matrix, and then the bottom half of the matrix is the unimportant and not urgent, and the unimportant and urgent. And those are the things that you're supposed to either do the 4 Ds. You either delegate it, you defer it, you drop it.
No, delete it, yeah.
And delete it, yes. But anyway, it sort of reminds me of that. The whole point of the Eisenhower Matrix is that you're supposed to deal with what is important and will move the needle.
Yeah, but I think that, 40X does a really good job of not just dealing with what's important, right? The client care issues, right? You can time block dealing with all my client complaints, even though it's not my true production time. But it helps you get ahead and helps you actually implement and that E word execute on some of your bigger goals, whether they be life or professional, the things that you want to see in your team, in your firm. You can't do that just all in one, it's not a once and you're done thing. You have to look at it over time. I think that that's what 40X does a really good job of. Going back to some of the things that we talked about in our first episode about, just why and the quality of life, 40X helps keep things, in my opinion, from becoming like reactive, right? When you're always caught up in the whirlwind, it's literally like this little Tasmanian devil of life, of being an attorney. And you get to really, with 40X in that kind of discipline, for lack of a better word, of putting your, we'll talk about the scorecard and the lead measures, lagging measures and all those things, your WIGs in the next segment. It really does help you execute and you get peace of mind.
This podcast is sponsored by Marc Whitehead Associates, a national disability benefits law firm. Marc Whitehead runs a firm of over 60 dedicated people whose mission is to make a difference in the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Marc represents disabled claimants in Social Security disability, private disability insurance, and veterans disability claims in all 50 states. Marc Whitehead is double board certified in both Social Security disability law and personal injury trial law. Marc has litigated disability cases in over 40 states and counting and can help your clients too. Stop throwing your phone calls away. Call Marc Whitehead at 701-VIP-LEAD. That's 701-VIP-LEAD or visit our website at disabilitydenials.com. Referral fees are paid in all jurisdictions where it is permitted. Refer us your disability cases today and know that your clients will be in good hands.
And we're back. All right, Diana, let's talk about the 4 core tenets, I would say, how I describe them, of the 4 disciplines of execution.
Mm-hmm.
I'll rattle them off real quickly. 1 is focus on the wildly important. 2 is act on lead measures. 3, keep a compelling scoreboard. And 4, create a cadence of accountability. Those are the 4 simple tenets of the 4 disciplines of execution. But what does each of those mean? You want to go first? You want to talk about focusing on the wildly important?
Yeah, of course. Mainly just because I think you talk about Covey. So there's a Stephen Covey quote in the book about the wildly important that I'm just going to use to talk about it. So he says, you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage to say no to other things. And I think that the yes is just as important as the no. And actually everyone in this firm probably knows by now that I absolutely love my new planner that I got this year. And I think that that's what one of the things that it does is these are the 3 things that I've said that I'm going to get done today. And if they don't fall in the 3, unless it's on a really, that quadrant of the Eisenhower Matrix, sorry, but you're just not going to fit into my day, because it's allowed me really to be comfortable saying, no, I'm working on some big things today.
So, and that is the hard part about the first one, focusing on the wildly important. And I like how they phrase it, the wildly important, or what they call WIGs, your wildly important goals, or your WIGs. Because by definition, what it means is you have to prune some good ideas. Mm-hmm. There are some things that are good ideas, but they haven't made the top of the list yet.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean they're never going to get there. When we first introduced the concept of WIGs to our staff, they were like, first of all, what's a wig? Do you mean something you put on top of your head? No, we're not talking about something you put on your head. Your wildly important goals. And I think the first thing that I noticed, they say usually 1 or 2, probably no more than 3 WIGs at a time.
Exactly. I think they say 1.
Okay. So what time frame are we talking about in terms of a WIG? Are we talking about a 90-day time frame? Are we talking about a 12-month time frame? How do we implement that in our firm?
I think we work best on a quarterly. So we are fiscally the calendar year, so that helps us out, right? So if when any of our listeners have a different fiscal year, you might need to change that up. But we work very well on quarters. It works best when we're going to talk about later about our scoreboard and how we tied our scoreboard into our bonus metrics, and which are quarterly anyway. So I think we run ours on quarter. But breaking down, and we'll talk about this in our second on the lead measures, but breaking it down to bite-sized goals each quarter.
Yes. So how, within our firm, how do we establish WIGs? So first of all, you have different WIGs at different levels within the firm. Mm-hmm. So you have the firm-wide WIG, which is, at the firm level. But then we have, if I'm counting right, we have 5 different sections within the firm. And each section has their own WIGs, what we'd call sub-WIGs. But their WIGs need to be aligned with the firm's overarching WIGs. Sometimes that can actually be in conflict as well. Getting alignment within the firm to make sure that different sections are not working at cross purposes with each other is very important when we're developing our quarterly WIGs. Different books have different terminologies, and last week we were talking about the EOS system and traction, and their terminology, they refer to them as rocks.
You have BHAGs.
Or BHAGs, all of these funny words. They're all the same thing.
Exactly.
Which is the important goals that we intend to execute on over the next 90 days. So rocks, BHAGs, WIGs, talking about the same thing. I notice this every author, because they all have to sell a book, has to come up with their own terminology.
Yeah. Nothing new these days, that's for sure.
Yes, everybody's got a book to sell, and everybody got to make their book unique. But they're talking about the same concepts here. Can you give us an example of like a firm-wide WIG that we're currently trying to implement?
Yeah. So One of my wigs slash rocks, if you want to call them, for this quarter was implementing QBO or QuickBooks Online with Litify, our case management software.
So to get our accounting software to talk to our case management software.
Exactly. Financial data to talk to your actual production data.
Which pretty much took an act of Congress to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point about, how we break things down, first quarter, it was just simply the rock was implementing QBO, right? So we did that at the beginning of, or in middle of Q1.
Switching from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, quite frankly, was a nightmare. And it was certainly outside of the whirlwind. It took some very specific, dedicated time away from doing the day-to-day business to make that happen.
Exactly. We don't have that in one specific job description, implement QBO, or even now make the data fit together. Certainly not at our size. Larger organizations or firms may. But the wig was to implement the two systems. And so that included finding a vendor, creating a budget for this, and then now working with said vendor to figure out the mapping and to dummy test clients to see if the mapping works, and creating all the things to make it happen. So.
And then we have to train our staff on it. Talk about moving people's cheese. Yes, that is definitely a project that I had no idea how hard it was going to be when we started this.
You have no idea. But I think to the point about what makes a wig, right? So again, to echo what the authors say about a wig, this is not our whirlwind. This is aside from my other responsibilities of hiring and onboarding and the case management software, right? Trying to make it better or even create reports inside the case management software. It's separate apart from the financial analysis that at our monthly financial meetings that I do in QBO. This is completely different. I cannot emphasize that you cannot make what is in the whirlwind a wig unless it is absolutely, I think that's one of the tenets of the book. Don't make your whirlwind a wig, absent, I guess, extreme circumstances.
So let me put it to you this way. So the book says limit your wigs to 1 or 2, 3. Can you imagine if I would have assigned you 10 of these wigs in a quarter?
You have tried.
I know, and I have learned. And I guess my point would be, because in my mind, as the visionary, I want everything done yesterday.
Yeah. And for all the integrators listening, here's a tip and a trick for you when your visionary does this to you. You say yes, and then you say, okay, when do you want this done? In like 3 quarters? Because then it's a good compromise for both of you. It's letting him or her know as the visionary that, yeah, of course, let's do it. I see your vision, but also we have other things that you've envisioned beforehand. So it's a good trick for the integrators out there.
Yes, I've learned that I'm being manipulated here.
Managed.
Okay, you can use whatever words you like, but I've been manipulated here. But I see the point. There's no way that you, as the integrator, could manage 10 projects of this magnitude at one time. We have to pick and choose. We have to prioritize. Sometimes we have to prune and just give up on what would be good ideas because they just don't make the top 10 list. They don't make the top cut of what we need to accomplish.
And for all of the other attorneys listening that are somewhere in your position, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind for all the attorneys that you do manage, that they also have their client loads and their teams that they're trying to manage. So you can't burn out your team if you don't do that. So what's next on our second?
All right. So the first one was focus on the wildly important. The second one is act on leading measures as opposed to acting on lagging measures. And this is a hard concept for a lot of people to understand.
Including me.
Yes. Because the thing about lagging measures is you can't influence lagging measures. There's nothing you can do about it. It already happened. The best example of a lagging measure is looking at your P&L statement from the last quarter, looking at your profits from the last quarter. There's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is. The numbers aren't going to change. It's the result already occurred. So that's looking backwards. A lagging measure is simply looking backwards. What you want to do are find the leading measures that are going to happen in the future that you can influence. Okay, so for example, I can't influence what my profit margin was last quarter, but how can I influence what my profit margin is going to be this quarter? In other words, what are the leading measures that I can influence? Okay, I can try to get my lawyers to settle their cases faster and collect on their cases faster. Those are leading measures. We can improve our marketing and our sign-up efficiency to try to get more cases in that we can make money on. That's a leading measure. I'm probably not thinking of some of the more subtle ones, but working on productivity and efficiency in general is a leading measure to how well your lagging measure, your profitability is going to be in the future. The hard part about leading measures is they frequently are hard to measure and they're hard to track. They tend to be subtle. How can I quantifiably measure my attorney's effort, especially in a contingency fee firm where we're not billing?
Sure, yeah.
How do I measure effort? How do I measure staff productivity? How do I measure efficiency? These are all leading measures, but they're hard to quantify. And that's why it's so hard for people to even figure out what their leading measures are, let alone figure out what to do about it.
So are leading measures and lagging measures always defined, or does it depend on the context? So here's my example. So revenue is a lagging measure, right? It's already happened. You've gotten, especially for us, we're contingency, all the thing, governmental base. So we want it 6 weeks ago sometimes before we see the money. So revenue is always for us in our firm a lagging measure, whereas new leads or contracts signed might be leading measures for us because they're telling us potentially, if you have the formula right, what our revenue could be down the line.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I would say you actually hit a very good point, and this is why this is such a subtle argument here, was that some people's leading measures can be other people's lagging measures.
I see.
So a leading measure for the firm is case signups, firm-wide, in terms of firm-wide and our potential future revenue. For our intake department, cases signed is actually a lagging measure because that's their ultimate end goal, is to sign new cases. So for them, it's a lagging measure. Their leading measures are number of interviews conducted, number of internet form fills that they follow up on, how fast they return phone calls. Those are their leading measures to get to their lagging measure of signing up cases, which then in turn is the leading measure for the firm as a whole in terms of revenue. So yes, depends on your perspective and where you are in the chain of the process.
So assuming we've not confused all of our listeners on the difference between the two, and that you've
trust me, we've confused them totally.
Yep, I think I might have confused myself there. So the discipline 2 is to act on the lead measure. So assuming that we have now identified potentially listeners what your lead measures might be, what is the discipline? How do you act on the lead measures? What does the book say?
I think, number one, you've got to know your numbers. You can't manage what you can't count. So you have to figure out a way to quantify what your leading measures are. And again, this can be difficult. They typically are harder to measure. So for example, we had a hard time figuring out how to measure our intake staff's productivity, and we had to really think about it. And ultimately, we came up with a few metrics. How many outbound calls were they making on a daily basis or a weekly basis? How many inbound calls were they taking?
Live calls.
How many live calls? How fast, in terms of time, were they getting back to the internet form fills that we get in all the time? In other words, speed. That's not the easiest thing to measure.
Yeah, but the more powerful case management software you have, the better, then the easier it is. And
we had to invest in technology to be able to measure those things. Before we invested heavily in the technology that we've invested in, we really had no real way of measuring those things, even though we knew that's what the key leading indicators were. So yes, we've invested literally, in our case, hundreds of thousands of dollars in software to be able to measure these things.
Yep. And so I like in the book, My High C really likes how the book says that in a wildly important goal, the formula from X to Y by when defines your lag measure. And so
your lag or your leading measure?
Your lag measure, actually.
Your lag measure.
Interesting. Okay. But I still like the fact that it helps you. The book's good, guys. Get the book. But also it gives you concrete ways to help you define things that are somewhat amorphous when we talk about lag and lead measures.
All right.
So moving on to the third discipline, which hopefully we're both more comfortable with, Marc.
keeping a compelling scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think this is yours, but I'll let you lead with it, but I have a few thoughts.
Yeah, well, let's start with your thoughts.
All right. So the analogy that's used within the book is the scoreboard at a football game. Why is it there? So everybody, including the players and the fans and the coaches, know if you're winning or losing. How can you be effective either as a leader or as a team member if you can't tell whether you're winning or losing?
That was my point, actually. I was going to say, so the book, I think this one hit home. I started underlining it when I read it. One of the most demoralizing aspects of life in the whirlwind is that you don't feel you can win. And so, especially in my position, I think about the person that for us, maybe it's our medical records team calling for Social Security particularly, because that can be particularly grueling. We live in Texas, or some of our Texas clients, with Social Security cases, you can probably explain the role better than I can with medical records. Facilities can't charge us, right, for medical records for a Social Security claim.
We are a free medical record state, yes.
Which also means that facilities don't necessarily care about our requests.
We get put to the bottom of the stack.
And so what does that do probably for our team members? That's their 8 to 5. Every day, that's all they do is, call and no, they make routine calls for people who don't necessarily care about the requests. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is create that scoreboard for them, Litify, particularly to make sure that they can see how they're winning and how they influence decisions and those types of things.
Right. My favorite scoreboard, though, is not an electronic scoreboard. It's a visual scoreboard. I love whiteboards. In my term, as I love to whiteboard the shit out of things.
This is true.
Our AA section has a whiteboard that is set up to where they keep the score. Okay, I've been asked to define what our administrative appeal section has a scoreboard, a whiteboard set up right out in front of the manager's office. It's kept up, hopefully on a routine daily basis, of how well they're doing on their certain leading measures that they're trying to measure. And so everybody can see it. They can see, are they ahead of schedule? Are they behind schedule? But it tells them if they're winning or not. And what it's supposed to do is to motivate people.
Yeah, and I know exactly which one you're talking about, and it's magnetic, so it's got bright, colorful magnetic stars. Our mass torts attorney one time also created a fun one, and colorful as well. I try to remember what she came up with a clever name for it to incorporated their kind of team dynamic, and it was really good too. So I think that the book calls it a compelling is the word that they use, compelling scorecard. That's the word I would use.
The favorite scorecard that we use is set up down in our kitchen, and that's and we stole this from Craig Golenfarb, just totally ripped it off because he failed to trademark it. But Craig set up a system called Refer a Case, Feed Your Face, basically incentivizing your employees to refer their friends, family, people they know to the firm if they have legal issues, trying to an internal referral program, if you will. So we have that set up down in the kitchen where everybody can see it, and we keep track every quarter. They have a goal. If they get a certain number of internal referrals to the firm, then we rent a food truck and bring the food truck over. Sometimes it has margaritas as well. And we have a big party every quarter if they meet their goal. And this has become sort of ingrained in the culture of the firm. But it's a big scoreboard in the kitchen that everybody can see every time they go out on a break. And people get really into this because they want that food truck.
Yep. We did ice cream it was really hot last year, June last year. And so we did not what hot dog. We did ice cream in paletas too. So
of course, my favorite was when we did margaritas. That's just me.
We also had agua frescas there too for all the non-alcoholic people. But I think that the 4 characteristics and that's mentioned in the book on a compelling scoreboard is it simple? Can I see it easily? Does it show lead and lag measures? And then can I tell at a glance if I'm winning? Very easy, simple for you to, if you wanted to create your own scoreboard, to do that. I mean, like 4 easy metrics. So I like that part of it.
All right. So the last of the 4, just to recap, focus on the wildly important, act on the leading measures, keep a compelling scoreboard. And the 4th tenet of 40X is to create a cadence of accountability. Now, I will say that's probably the hardest of the 4 to do. Not that it can't be done. It's actually simple. It's a simple thing to do, but it's hard to execute on. Simply the concept of the book, because it requires you to change a habit. or to
create a habit.
create a new habit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we did 4DX for the first time, a year and a half ago?
Mm-hmm.
And everything, I think, in the book stuck with us, with the exception of the last part, which was creating a cadence of accountability.
Yep.
And that's where we actually brought in and started implementing the EOS system, which we talked about in our last podcast, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, to help us create that cadence of accountability. So now our cadence of accountability are the level 10 meetings, which is a concept within EOS, where we have firm leadership meetings that follow a extremely specific format once a week. But then also each section has its own level 10 meeting per week, following a very specific format. So what we've actually done is we've melded two concepts. We've melded the EOS system, which was based on Gino Wickman's book Traction, with the 4DX system, which was based on the Covey system, or the Franklin Covey system, to create that cadence of accountability.
Yep. And so I think that for us and the team, the whole MWA team, 4DX was almost like a primer to the EOS kickoff that we did a couple of months ago, in that a lot of the concepts and the principles are the same, right? Your WIG session, your cadence of accountability, the suggestions that the book gives are like, hold a meeting at the same time every week to discuss the thing, and that's exactly what a level 10 is, right? Our level 10s and every department's level 10 happen at the same time every week.
They're sacred. They do not get moved, come hell or high water, or in our case, a frickin' tornado.
Hurricane season soon.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think that the whole point of it, like, and generally in life or in anything you do, consistency is key. And so, like you said, yeah, we don't cancel it, but just get used to discussing it to maybe get that buy-in from your team members on discussing their WIGs, discussing their rocks, those types of things.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, I love our cadence of accountability now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think the brilliant part is modern technology and modern calendaring systems is you can auto calendar things. And that has really helped our cadence of accountability, not just our level 10 meetings. We also have standard monthly dashboards where there's a format with each section presents the results of the month. Those are all auto calendared. Again, that's all part of this cadence of accountability. What the hell did we do before we had auto calendaring? I don't know. We never got anything done.
Yeah, I don't really know.
This is Marc Whitehead, lawyer, entrepreneur, and business coach. Thanks for listening to the Successful Barrister podcast. If we've stirred your juices, hit me up with an email at marc@marcwhitehead.com. Remember, Marc is spelled with a C. And get on the Successful Barrister newsletter mailing list. Even better, let's set up a call. I'd love to talk to you about working together, talk shop, or just shooting the breeze. All right, and we're back. Wrapping up our discussion on the 4 disciplines of execution, achieving your wildly important goals. Let's see, who are the authors? McChesney, Covey, and Huling. The note here that our director has given us is this has sold over 500,000 copies just in, I guess, to the U.S. I'm not sure what the worldwide numbers are.
So I think we wanted to talk in our little wrap up about, how did we actually, it's all good in theory. It's good to tell our listeners about the book and, how we look at it. But how did we actually apply the book?
The first part is that you have to be persistent, because you will try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, and then you will try and then partially succeed, and eventually you will try and succeed. Your progress with this is not going to be linear. No. It's going to be in fits and starts.
Tumultuous.
Yes, because you're moving people's cheese, and you're holding people accountable. You're always going to get a little pushback, whether it's overt pushback or subtle pushback, or just people hope you forget about it and go away.
Well, let's not forget where we started. That's the whirlwind, right? So you got to our positions, the visionary and integrator, managing partner, COO positions in all the firms out there that are listening. You've got to have the consistency to hold your attorneys accountable, because they're in the whirlwind as much as any of your other team members, and they're the ones you're counting on to help carry this message down the line.
It is so hard to get attorneys out of their whirlwind, especially our attorneys who are all litigators.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think litigators are specifically afflicted with a whirlwind mentality because they have opposing forces out there working against them. So
Highly reactive.
they're highly, highly reactive. And to get them to think past what's on their docket this week or this coming month is really, really hard to do. So
If I may, that you can't look at it at the moment. And so in preparing for this segment, I think the thing that we discussed is that, so Anthony is a partner in the firm and manages our Social Security department. We have team members across many offices. It's our largest by number in terms of team members. But his department is also fully on Litify, and so our case management software. One of the things that he did with when we were doing 4DX, so a year and a half ago is what we said, he made his lead measures part of his team's bonus scorecard. So here at the firm, we do a quarterly bonus for our non-exempt employees. They get graded on a metric or a series of metrics, and that WIG made it into that scorecard. And now looking back a year and a half later, that WIG is no longer on the scorecard because it was quote unquote accomplished. One of the things that we did was develop automations to do it without the team member having to do what we were trying to get it to do. And so I think you should expect as time goes on that your WIGs will change. They should change over time, but also in the moment when you're trying to get buy-in from people and you're like, no, this is going to be great. We're going to change the way we do business and it's going to be great for our clients. And even you, I'm sure of it. And all you get's just the blank stare from your team members. It can feel very daunting, not only in this role, but I'm sure for Anthony and all the other people like and all the other attorneys in their department. But looking back, now we can see just how far we've come. Whether you call it the J curve or I think that's what, don't look at it in the moment. Make sure you take a hindsight look at it.
So I think the key points that you made there, a couple of things. Number one, we build our WIGs into our bonus structure. And we explain this to our staff. This is your WIG. This is how it's built into your bonus structure. This is what we're trying to accomplish because people need to know the why to really have the buy-in, but it helps if you compensate them in their pocketbook. So, and the other thing is that we tell people your bonus structure, i.e. your WIGs, are going to change from quarter to quarter. Just because we bonus you this way this quarter based on this WIG doesn't mean that we're not going to change it next quarter because our priorities will change. And I think that's one of the things, the keys to this is that us changing our bonus structure to meet the quarterly WIGs, number one, emphasizes the point to our staff and gets them to buy in to the fact that their cheese is going to be moved periodically based on what the priorities of the firm are at the moment. I would say the second thing that we've done to really implement this is that our leadership team now does a quarterly offsite within the EOS system, and it gets us out of the whirlwind. It is so important to be offsite. We just focus for one day a quarter, and it allows us to step back, establish those quarterly rocks, those quarterly wildly important goals, and kind of think through how we're going to actually execute that.
On a personal level, again, we've talked about my planner this episode, but I think our former coach, Nora, she was really big on think time. And so one of the things that I did in December was block out think time personally for the rest of the year. Once a month. At the beginning of the quarter, it's always 90 minutes, and every other month is 60 minutes. But I review my personal life goals during the think time, my professional goals, my yearly plan, where I am with everything to see if I am moving things forward. The worst thing that I think, or the most disincentivizing thing I think that we can do for, and I'm sure all the leaders listening can understand it, is to look back a year ago and be like, shit, I'm in the same place I was. I'm complaining about the same things I was. Nothing's changed. I haven't taken that trip. My team's still complaining. And that's where, to echo the book and kind of bring this to a close, you don't feel like you're winning. Yeah. And everybody wants to be a winner.
Everybody wants to be a winner. You got to know the scoreboard.
Got to know the scoreboard.
All right. With that, we'll bring this episode to a close. I do want to invite everybody, if you have any questions or comments, I would love your feedback. You can email me directly at marc@marcwhitehead.com. Remember, I spell Marc with a C.
Visit our website, successfulbarrister.com.
Yes, check out our website, thesuccessfulbarrister.com. We would love to have your feedback. And above all, make sure that if you found anything of value in this podcast, if you would go and leave us a 5-star review. We are on all podcast platforms. The more we can get good reviews, the more we can get the word out, the more people we could help and influence, and we would certainly love to have your feedback. With that, we're out of here.
Bye.
Bye.